Jon and Brett Harvey, who are going to be turning on their screens. Hi guys, there you go. We did it. Amazing. It's amazing to have you all here. Thank you so much for coming along. This is going to be a great little chat we're having. It's part of our ReBels Masterclass series. We run them every Thursday night in term time. We're going to take a break next week because it should be half term if we weren't all locked down and living our lives inside bubbles. But after that, we will be back with 5 new brand amazing free webinars that are done every week. So make sure you tune in to those. But it's now to introduce the wonderful Jon Crooks and Brett Harvey, who are here to talk about filming with next to no budget. These guys have experience. They've worked with the BBC, done big films. Jon had a lovely moment of a show he shot in over lockdown, just had his poster in LA sent to him, which was a really good moment for him today. So it's amazing stuff. I'll let them introduce themselves because they're going to be a lot more efficient at that. But if you need anything, just say. If we have a couple of little things to take you through at the beginning of today. So if you're looking to send any questions, we'd love them. If you go to the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A and chat function. Please send your questions through to there for Jon and Brett, because this is going to be a bit more of a chat. So we'll love to have your input into that. If you've got anything really burning ask, please put that there. You are all muted, and please, that's the way we're going to stay. There's no cameras, but use the chat function to help us talk. Okay, I'm going to stop now. Did I introduce myself? I probably didn't. I'm James. I'm part of the Barbican team, and I'm going to be hosting this. Sorry. I'll hand over to Brett, who's going to introduce himself and take you through a bit of his work, and then we'll go to Jon. So over to you, Brett.
James, thank you, Jon. Hello, everybody. My name's Brett Harvey. I'm a writer and director. I'm based down in Cornwall. I actually don't know how many short films I've written and directed, quite a lot though. Music videos, TV adverts, promos, and I've written and directed 3 feature films. And yeah, worked in all kinds of different things over the years, and worked with Jon Crooks quite a lot as well. That was my pass over to you.
That's seamlessly segueing into me. Hello, I can't see anyone, but I guess you're all there. I'm Jon, and I've been working in film for nearly sort of 20 years, and mainly in and around the camera department. And I'm shooting more and more stuff now as a cinematographer, but I've sort of worked in the lighting department, and I'm actually about to start directing a film for James tomorrow morning. So yeah, sort of real all-rounder and filmmaker, but camera really is my skills, and lighting is like my sort of main love, I guess. Although
how long have we worked together, Crooksy?
Don't know, quite a long time. Sorry, I'm terribly lit this morning. Today, I would.
Yeah, so much for the cinematography.
I literally just ran up here into the room with terrible lighting, but
I think we've probably worked together probably 20 years then, haven't we?
Yeah, and I think
we actually studied together. Jon and I studied together, so we've basically worked together ever since then, off and on over the years.
Yeah, great. This is nice. This means we can just have a catch up, Brett. This is
yeah. It's just more of a chat at the moment. That's great. I love it. Yeah, to be a director, Brett, was that always your aim, or was it kind of you just came into for a love of film? How did you start off?
Yeah, I was always quite keen to direct. Yeah, I sort of fell into filmmaking in a slightly roundabout way, but I was always quite keen to direct. Yeah, and that was the goal, to sort of work towards that. And I never really I didn't really start out writing or anything like that. I just wanted to direct and make stuff, and then I kind of realized that I had to write something in order to direct it. So I became a director by mistake, and I kind of, as a proxy, became a writer by mistake as well. And I've ended up doing that for, about 20 years. But I was studying theatre, and I was sort of interested in being an actor, and I was doing a media course at the same time. And then it was my mates and I were messing around with cameras, and we randomly made a short horror film, and then premiered it at a house party for like 80 drunk students, and they just went bananas for it. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh, I like this. And that's how I sort of got into filmmaking. You might have been at that party, Crooksy.
Probably, mate, probably. But it's quite interesting because that is sort of taking me down memory, but remembering when we were at college, there was a real group of creatives, theatre, film, musicians, and we all sort of were mates and making stuff. And it was really, I think I was very similar to Brett. We were making stuff for fun rather than as a response to a job or to a course or something. It was more that we just could do it and actually really enjoyed it. And I think some of the first stuff you do when you do it for fun, it's just, it's such a buzz. When you get bigger jobs, and I've worked on things from no money to like billions of pounds, it sort of feels that the more money, the more stress that's involved with it, it's sort of, you lose what's key to what you're trying to make, I guess.
Well, there's a certain sort of purity to those films you make, and it's something that we'll probably talk about quite a lot. But what I always sort of subscribe to is that thing of actually sort of budgets and things make things easier and make things more complicated. But the things that are absolute it's the ideas, isn't it? It's the purity of the idea, and it's kind of like, actually your ideas are sort of your currency. That's what makes the stuff that you're making interesting. So those early things when you mess around with your mates, the purity of the ideas are sort of what drive them forward, I think.
And talking about that, how do you find does that idea come to you? Is that the first bit you start to? Obviously some projects might jump in later. So do you go looking for that idea, or is it because you're a writer yourself, Brett? Do you go, actually, I know this is the idea I'm going to run with for the next couple of months? Or how do you kind of select those ideas?
It sort of comes from different places, really. I tend to just whenever you're sort of hit with the inspiration, I just scribble down the sort of sentence idea, and then probably leave it for years. And then we'll see it one day and go, oh, that thing, yeah, and sort of develops from there. But they kind of marinate in your brain for quite a while. And sometimes you're randomly you stumble upon ideas, and then other times you'll get a brief for a project, and that will spark a load of things. I was talking to somebody earlier about, I was out on the coast in Cornwall, and there was a line of second homes. So houses that are only lived in for 3 months of the year and are empty for the rest of the year. And I remember looking at those houses and thinking, well, if anything happened in one of those houses, nobody would know, because all of the houses around it are empty. And I thought, oh, that's probably a good setting for a film. That eventually turned into my first feature film, Weekend Retreat, just a tiny little notion idea like that. You go, and then it kind of sparks you off into different directions. But it's kind of the same for filming, isn't it, Crooksy? It's that you're on set and you're looking at something and you just have that idea for a shot or a bit of lighting or a moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think an inspiration comes from all over the place, and sometimes being able to just go, I want to shoot that. So for example, James, we're shooting this thing tomorrow. This first shot is behind something hidden away, where actually you go, what are you filming in there for? And it's going, well, look, it's great from what you're seeing through the lens. And you've got to be just sort of, I guess, knowing what the idea is that you're trying to create and being true to that first is really key. And I think in my experience, I've always worked on other people's stuff, really, because I'm more of a camera person or lighting person who's worked for directors or worked with directors. So you're always trying to sort of create their vision, I guess, and then became professional and got work and kept getting stuff and making stuff for different people.
Yeah.
And sort of found that, now I'm getting to a stage where I'm going, I actually want to make my own thing so I can be in control of all that stuff and have the sort of control from the beginning, really, I guess.
Yeah. I find the moment on any production is when, so if I've written it and kind of generated the idea, and if I'm going to direct it, for me, the moment I'm desperate for is when it's no longer mine and when it's ours and when we can make it together. I sort of long for that moment where somebody else is kind of, so Jon and I made a short film years ago. Jon was DOP on it, Final Flight of the Falcons. Remember that, Jon? That was a very long time ago now. But there was a lovely moment where Jon and I started working on it together, because then you're working with another collaborator, and I kind of want Jon's eye and his visual language on it, because you want people to take ownership of the idea and feel like it's theirs as well. I find that's when you make the best work. And also, I don't know half the time. So somebody goes, what should this look like? And I'll be like, Don't know. Let's find out.
Right, and that's where John steps in and goes, "Oh, it should be exactly, or could be like this." Crooksy, with that in mind, like, how did you sort of start off and come to be a cinematographer, DOP? Was that where you wanted to go, or was it kind of just through experimentation, being in the camera department?
Well, it really, the honest truth is, again, I sort of fell into it really. I used to throw parties when I was younger and put lights up and create atmospheres. And I did a lot of theatre technician and a lot of theatre sort of lighting design, and really always just was obsessed with light and looking at light and how it made me feel, and not capturing it but just staring at it quite a lot of the time. People feel like, but it's not really noticing what light was doing. And then sort of started creating that stuff, and then worked with a lot of other camera people and started specializing in the way cameras moved or the way stuff was lit, and really sort of trying to push that to the best I could. I guess, yeah, that was how it sort of fell about. But again, I think I was in the right place at the right time, because I was in a part of Cornwall where we were all growing up, and there was a real community of filmmakers and artists and theatre people working together, and there seemed to be one of everything. There wasn't too many of that. There wasn't loads of cinematographers. There wasn't loads, and I used to work with a cinematographer down there who was very much about the camera, and then I would do the sort of lighting, and it was sort of, we all sort of naturally fell into our roles because they needed to be filled. But if we wanted to create stuff, we needed everybody to be pushing in that thing, and actually we naturally fell into the roles that we wanted to fall into. So it's sort of, I can't say that I did anything to make it happen. It sort of just did.
You started out, my memory of your early stuff, Crooksy, is I can vividly remember some of the early short films you directed. Cat food.
Yeah, I know. And then I put it on hold. I mean, there's still loads of films I want to direct and things I want to make, but it's the sort of professional side of it is taking over a little bit, and I need to earn a living and I need to make money, and I very much have got to a stage now where I'm working on projects that I want to work on, which is a great place to be, rather than just chasing the rent or trying to make stuff because you can get paid for it. It's actually now I'm getting employed to make this because I can bring something that's really great to the project, rather than just being a part of the machine, I guess. And I think some of the bigger things that I've worked on, not to name drop any films, but some of the bigger films that I've worked on, I've not really enjoyed, because I'm literally I'm there carrying stands around or like plugging a cable in. There's no creative input. So you might get a credit on a huge film, but actually the smaller sort of seamlessly integrated into low budget stuff, but the smaller low budget stuff where you've got a lot more creative control over, with a team that are doing it for the passion rather than the money, you've certainly got a lot more out of it, I guess.
I think it's a good thing if there are people in the watching that are interested in making stuff. And it sounds almost sort of redundant to say it, but I think the best thing you can do is kind of just make stuff as well. Try out little ideas, make a little 60-second film, a little 2-minute film, and just keep making little things like that. So certainly when John and I were first starting out, we were involved with a screening night in Truro, which was upstairs of this dinky little bar where we would project films that people were making. And that was the best education I ever got, because I was making stuff. It was a monthly screening, and I was making stuff and then screening it in front of a paying audience. This little 2-minute thing I'd made with my housemates or whatever. And you're getting in the room kind of feedback from an audience of going, oh, okay, that works, that didn't work, how do I change that? And you kind of have got access to that now, with Vimeo and YouTube, of getting stuff out there. But it really is about just sort of making stuff and sort of stumbling your way through, because the tech side of it is fine. You can kind of learn editing stuff. There are online tutorials and things, and you can get more aptitude with the camera, but it's the ideas and the creative side of it you've got to sort of nurture and play around with, and not be afraid to make bad stuff as well.
And I think they both me and Brett made films for their rough cut nights that we used to do, and go as far as to say that that's the reason I work in films, because of those nights, because of the buzz you would get from someone. You would make something and you put it in front, you'd be like literally shitting yourself. And there's only like 50 people in there who like, but you're in this weird little room. They put it on and they're just all laughing. Suddenly go, it works. This is great. And you sort of go, I've got to do another one for next week. And then you sort of next month. And so we did that for quite a long time. And I guess the way that people can make stuff now is it feels like you can throw stuff away quite, easily with putting stuff on the internet or YouTube channels or things like that, where you don't get that audience reaction that we were getting there. And it's probably quite easy to put something on, you get 1 million views on it, but do they really engage with it? Do they really like it? Does it really get the emotion you want to get across? So remembering those nights of what that audience used to do taught us a lot about filmmaking, I guess. Like you'd put something on that you think was hilarious and it would just be like a lead balloon. You'd be like, oh right, that doesn't work because it isn't funny, because it doesn't do that, because
I'll never forget the lesson I learned at Rough Cut. So the course that John and I were on, I was doing my final project and I made this really super ambitious short film. It was like 20 minutes long. It had a cast of like 50 or 60 people or something. It was like really ambitious and I completely destroyed myself trying to make it. And then right at the end of production, I thought, I'm going to make something for myself that's fun. And I was still living at home with my parents and we had a shed at the bottom of the garden with a chinchilla in a cage. And whilst I was making my project, I would feed him in the mornings and go, you'll never guess what's happened on the film, and complain to my chinchilla. This sounds like I'm insane. And then one Sunday, I just made up a little short film and I made it in like 2.5 hours, filmed the chinchilla, filmed myself talking to him, like with a funny little punchline on the end of it, showed it to my mate and he went, yeah, it's all right. I swear to you, that film with 50 or 60 people in it, was 20 minutes long, has been screened about twice. That film with the chinchilla, I've won 3 awards for. It's played in festivals around the world. And it was just this thing that I made in sort of 2.5 hours. And I literally nearly threw it away. And then we screened it at Rough Cut and it got such a good response. I kind of went, oh, maybe that is something. And it was so interesting to sort of go, oh, wow, okay, it's about the idea. It's not doing big bells and whistles stuff. It's about the purity of the idea.
So then, how do you, especially when you are working on such shoestring budgets or on lower budgets, how do you always keep that in as the main focus? Because I guess it could be a lot easier sometimes going, if I had another, 15 grand to hire out the cameras for another couple of months, or how do you keep that balance of always making sure you're serving the idea whilst trying to balance budgets and trying to get the much engagement to make the film the best way it possibly could be?
Yeah, that's a tricky question.
I think it just comes down to knowing what the ideas that you're trying to get across. If your idea is a superhero film and you need all of that money and you need all of that stuff to make that thing, you can't make that any other way. Well, you probably could, but if I used to make mistakes when I was younger of going, I get a really good camera in because that's going to make the film. It's going to make the camera look great, or use all this really cool equipment. But the content has got no substance. So you kind of go, well, technically it's showing off the kit, but it's not working as a film. So knowing your idea and how, sort of being responsive to what you've got, and I think maybe Brett said earlier, or we were talking about earlier, the more money you get, sometimes it becomes harder because as a cinematographer, money is great for me because I can say, do you know what, I want this kind of lighting, and to create that, I need this, and I need to block all that off, and which is equipment and people and money to make that happen. But, I could also create that by going, do you know what, let me shoot it a bit closer, let's use available light, let's, change the way that I'm filming it, but it's still being true to the story. So the idea is key on anything. Money's not going to make your film good. The idea is going to make your film good.
You can kind of track it on a graph, because if you're going to make a film, you're already being ambitious. Whatever you're making, it's a really ambitious thing to do, and you have to keep it achievable. So if you were going to track it on a graph, the line going up this way would be ambition, and the line going up this way would be making it achievable. Where those two lines cross over, that's where your film sits. Do you know what I mean? So it's that thing of cutting your cloth accordingly. And if you haven't got the budget to make Jurassic Park, you probably shouldn't try and make Jurassic Park. You've got to sort of be realistic about what resources you've got and how you sort of deliver the thing. But there's so much ambition in getting actors and crew together for a day to film. That's already hugely ambitious to do. And I do think budget makes things harder in some respects. Because you've got to answer to people. So one of the feature films that I made was born out of after I made my first feature, we got into development on scripts for the next project. And I found that I was just stuck in development for years and years, and I wasn't making anything. And in the end, I just went, I'm going to make a feature film for no money. I'll pay for I'll try and pay and cover some expenses on it, and we'll just make it for no money. And then I pitched the idea to my brother, Si, who's the producer that I work with as well. I should say he was drunk and it was Christmas, so I caught him at a very good time. And he went, yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea. I'll put money into that. And we sort of self-financed it. We scrimped and saved and self-financed the film, which is terrifying because you're putting your own money on the line. But it was also incredibly liberating because for the first time I was making something where I didn't have to answer to anybody. Mm. It was all my ideas and my input, and I could make the thing that I wanted to make.
I guess also spending your own money, you're justifying those decisions by going, I'm not going to waste my own money on this thing. Whereas if you're spending someone else's money, you kind of go, it'd be cool if we had this, but we don't really need it. Yeah.
So
I do all the time, Joe.
No, it's fine. So finding that balance and like say with self-finance, was that feature film, did you shoot it over a longer period to kind of make that more manageable, or was that kind of really condensing it?
So I sort of long since learned making the shorts off my own back. It's really hard if you shoot them a week. If the shoot is spread out, it's actually harder. You're better off trying to carve out some days, 2 days in a row, a day where you can get everybody together 2 days in a row. We basically worked out with the money and resources we could pool on that film that we could shoot for 10 days. We could afford a tiny crew and a cast of 2 for sort of 10 days. And what was great about the budget about that film was it completely informed the way that we shot it and the look of the film and the style of it. It was kind of really sort of thrilling to make because it was like proper, really super low budget. And our plan with the self-financing was we spoke to our local cinema in Truro and said, would you put the film on for a week if we made it? And they're really great there. They've been really supportive and they said yes. And then as the film was getting finished and we showed it to them, they were like, oh, well, we've got other cinemas in Cornwall. You could release it in those cinemas for a week as well. And our ambition was to play in one cinema for 1 week. And we ended up we opened on 5 or 6 screens in Cornwall, and it played off and on. It played pretty much for 2 months in at least one of those cinemas. And one night, this was when the Seth Rogen comedy Bad Neighbours 2 was out. And our film was in the small screen and that was in the big screen, and the cinema phoned me up and went, we've just swapped. You've just kicked Seth Rogen off the big screen. I was like, yes, take that. So we eventually made back the money we invested in the film.
Amazing.
Just about.
And I was going to ask, because you're talking about like the shot styles, and Jon, obviously talking about the camera choices and what you're working with. As say people who are potentially watching who don't have experience with cameras or kind of know the shots, how do you find out which camera does what, or what lens, or how do you start to make that experimentation so you know that for on a shoestring budget you should use, I don't know, an Epic Dragon camera or something like that?
I think the thing with cinematography is it's a language, and there is a language that exists. You know, it's very subjective, but there is a language that exists. So the way the camera moves will evoke an emotion that, you know, if it moves in slowly, then we're getting closer to someone, so they're getting more important, or we're going to find a reaction or something. Whereas if the camera is shaking around, it's a bit more chaotic and it's feeling uneasy. So there's hundreds of different nuances to like whether the camera's low or what the lighting's doing, whether it's hard or soft, if it's warm or cold. But again, go back to knowing what you're trying to create and then looking into how do you create that is really the way to do it, I guess. So, and I think I've been doing quite a bit of teaching, and I teach cinematography at universities. And through teaching, I'm really telling myself, convinced, because everything's done as a instinct with me, really. And now that I'm teaching, I'm going, actually, the reason I'm doing that is because of that. And so I'm sort of, again, learned again by teaching, which has been really interesting. But yeah, the sort of knowing what you're trying to create and then think about what story that tells. And I think when you're learning, so if you're trying to learn how to light, for example, the natural thing is to go, okay, well, what lights can I get? How do they work? How do I plug them in? How do I rig them and all that? And actually, to learn to light, you need to learn to look at light and to learn to look at what light does. So in terms of, if there's a sunlight coming in, a nice warm golden summer morning light coming in through your kitchen window, how does that make you feel? Does that make you feel sad, or does that make you feel hopeful or happy or something like that? So the emotions created by the lighting doesn't change, but how you do it is a technical thing. So I guess what I'm saying is, the first thing is to learn how to look at stuff, how to analyze it. You know, when we started making films, we didn't really have the internet, or like things like Shot Deck, or like places where you could create images or find stuff. So building references and looking for stuff and going, this is what I'm trying to create, and then analyze it by looking at the light, then start thinking about how you do it, rather than, because I think what a lot of people do, especially the students I work with, is they'll think about a film and then they start thinking about how they're going to make it, by the equipment, by how the camera moves and all that. It's going, they miss the middle gap of developing the idea of the film, the feeling, what's important. And everything's important in film. So sound's important, production design's important, the performance, the cinematography. And if you're making something by yourself, especially if you're a specialist in one thing, you probably become quite biased. And I was always visually biased. I was very like, if it looks cool, that's enough for me. But actually, that makes you forget about a lot of other things that are in shot.
The other thing that you can do is if you want to look at cameras and lenses and things like that, if you've got an idea for a little short that you want to make, think about what films you like that are similar to that short that you want to make, because 9 times out of 10 you can find out what cameras that film has been shot on, or what lenses, or if they've used a certain lighting technique or a color grading technique in post. You can find out all that stuff online, so you could look at the things that are influencing you and kind of find out what they did on the production for that, because the DOPs are really great at putting up that information online. I find there's lots and lots of good resources on it. Anyway, sorry, let's watch Joe.
Well, maybe just to add on that is that the way that if you look, there's a film that you like, try and learning how to analyze the footage is probably a good starting point as well. Because if I shoot a close up of something, it's going to have a completely different effect than if I shoot an epic wide shot or something. So knowing what those differences are, is really key. So when you're creating that shot, ask yourself, is it creating what I want to create? Proves we work together.
So always a coincidence. I think it's really interesting you guys are talking about this balance of sort of working what you have and knowing what's the best way to sell your idea. Because obviously we are working on a film shoot together now, which obviously Brett, you're editing, and Jon, you're down here directing with Why Would You? And it's been really interesting working with the process about going, okay, the budget sort of helps us understand how we can best make that film, and some of the choices we made were very much in line with that, like doing quite a lot of shoot inside in controlled environments and other elements like that. I was just looking at the beautiful Neon Shadows film that was in your that you did over lockdown, or just after lockdown, wasn't it? It was just after the first lockdown.
I think it was in the first lockdown. Maybe it was.
Yeah. I was wondering how, because there is a kind of assumption, from the outside, there's an assumption that going, okay, if we just shoot on location, then it's a lot of the kind of set dressing, a lot of the costs dealt with. So how do you manage that when you are working with a low budget? Do you go, actually, sometimes even though you can't control the weather, it's better to shoot on location for certain aesthetics? Or is it sometimes better to work in controlled environment because actually, even though you're spending more on, say, set or other elements, you have a bit more control with lighting and control? So I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Sort of 6 of one, half a dozen the other, isn't it? It's kind of it's normally whatever's right for the sort of project. Neon Shadow was slightly unique because it was taking place in a very heightened world. So Tom, the director, designed and sort of created these tiny little sets which Jon had to. So Jon shot that and I did post-production on it, but I also kind of at one stage was going to co-direct it with Tom, and then I actually stepped off of that because Tom had such a clear idea of what he wanted to make. He was already directing it and I was like, it's your story to tell, and I just kind of was more in an advisory capacity for him, just sort of the planning and the sort of storyboarding of it, and then I did post and did the edit. But that was more about creating the sets and creating the world. But again, that was completely out of necessity, wasn't it, Jon? I mean, it was to do with lockdown restrictions.
Definitely. I mean, I don't think the Neon Shadow was like that was quite. It felt the film actually needed more money to make them what it was, and it needed more crew. And actually, the reality was Tom was up till gone midnight every night, doing loads of stuff and then directing and doing it. We were all working really hard, illegal hours, and really pushing it. But we wanted to do it. So it kind of, in one side, it's really hard and it's much harder, and it would have been easier to maybe have other stuff. But on the other side, that could have created more complications. It could complications. It could have I don't know. It just, not to say it's easier to make stuff on your own, but it's just choosing the right project, I guess, is the key to if you haven't got money, don't try and make a film that needs money. If you're making a film that you haven't got much money, but it does need a certain look, maybe that if you've got a little bit of money, that money goes on the equipment, but the actors and the direction and the location and everything is for free. Or you go, do you know what? I don't need this to look amazing, but I need the performance to be amazing. So you put the money on a professional actor or something. It's about, I guess, in that producing role is choosing where that money goes and making sure that if you've got any money, the right money goes in the right place. Or if you haven't got money, that you make the film you can make for no money.
I think the thing that's really important is whatever money you've got should go on looking after the people you're working with. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, back in the day when I was making lots and lots of short films, I always tried to, I couldn't afford to pay people to work on them, so I'd end up doing one-day shoots or afternoon shoots. But what I would do was go, I'll cover your petrol and I'll make sure that you're fed, and I'll make sure that if it says we're going to wrap at 5 o'clock, we'll wrap at 5 o'clock on the dot, and not kind of take the mickey with people. So at least if I couldn't pay people to work on it, I could at least, in theory, it wouldn't cost them anything to work on it. So when Si and I made the self-funded film, all of the money went on just paying for cast and crew. Hardly any of it went on. We had a little bit of props and costume and stuff like that, and a little bit for location fees because it was all shot on Bodmin Moor, which is quite a complicated place to get permissions for. But it all went on making sure everybody was paid and looked after, because I think that's ultimately the best production value you've got is your actors and your crew. It's the people that you're working with, because you can have the best script in the world and you can hire in the best kit, but if you don't have actors that you're paying and looking after, you won't get good performances. So it's all for nothing. And I think it's equally important to invest in your crew as well and look after the people that you're working with.
Maybe in the sort of low budget thing as well, is if you have to do stuff all by yourself. I mean, I call myself like an all-rounder, but I can do lots of, camera work, lighting, direction, storytelling, all of it. So if you're on a no budget thing or a low budget thing, having all of those skills to be able to pull upon is really good. Whereas if you can't do any of those technical things, but you're trying to create something that needs that input, maybe, do you see what I mean?
I always think from a directing point of view, I've done a little bit of sound recording. I'm not very good at it. I can shoot, but nowhere near to, I wouldn't be able to DOP a project. I can self-shoot stuff to a relatively good level. I can edit, but I think if you're going to direct stuff, it's really important to do all of these different roles so that you have an understanding of how it works, so that once you're working with people, you're not asking them to do something that's not possible to do, or you have an understanding of the profession. So I've first AD'd a bit as well, first assistant director, which is kind of running the set. That's really invaluable experience. So it's kind of the benefit of going to film school is you get to kind of do all those different roles. And the benefit that Jon and I had sort of coming up together and working together is, like John said, there was enough people around who were doing different roles that you could kind of help out on someone's film and have a play around on camera, or try your hand at different things and gain that sort of experience. I also think it's really important, if you want to direct, to do a bit of acting, even if you hate the experience and it makes you squirm. It's actually the process of being directed by somebody teaches you so much about direction and communication and how to treat people nicely and get a performance out of people.
And I guess it's that communication, being clear what you want. And I guess in a way, like they always say, time is money is the old adjective, isn't it? It's like, so actually knowing how to communicate to everyone, especially on a low budget, is so important, because then that brings them up. And I think what's also interesting, I wonder if there's a benefit, obviously, doing those roles on shorter films, because you can try stuff out. How much do you encourage like crew and actors to take bigger risks when you've got smaller budget and smaller time? Do you find, well, I'm going to ask you both, are bigger productions sometimes a bit more constrictive in what you can do because they are such a big machine compared to smaller kind of?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I think you should, when you're starting out, and I don't know who's in the room, but if they're sort of first-time filmmakers, I think it's to make a film with the idea that you want to make mistakes in it, because that's the best way you're going to learn, is by, we're talking about these different roles. When I started out, I didn't know what these roles were. I didn't know what a grip did, or what a gaffer did, or what a script supervisor did, or any of this sort of stuff. But by making films and then going, do you know what, sounds really bad on that, and that's having a huge effect. And so you learn about those roles and those mistakes and what makes a good film. And I think when you're watching stuff, look at all of the elements and look at all the credits that roll up, and think of all those people that were putting in so much effort and work to make that thing happen. The bigger stuff with more people generally does look better and feel better, and it's more impressive because there's so many people focusing in on the color of someone's shirt, or the or the way that light is working, or anything in the background that's slightly distracting, or there's so many eyes on that screen that they can all push it, I guess.
And I think you kind of, on smaller films, you have an opportunity to have a culture of whatever the best idea is, go with that. So on the last feature that I made, which is called Long Way Back, which is in theory going to be in festivals this year, Adam, the DOP, and I had lots and lots of discussions about how certain shots were going to look and how certain scenes were going to look. And then we were on set and we were just plotting it out, and Esther, who was in the scene, was getting into costume, and we were just plotting out the shots, and we couldn't quite, we discussed how it was going to look, but it sort of wasn't quite right on the day. The light didn't look right on the day. And then Jez, our first AD, just really quietly went, "It's a good shot from here." And we sort of laughed and went, "Oh, is there, Mr. First AD?" And then we both walked over and looked and went, "To be fair, that's a really good shot." And that's the one that we went with. And you kind of go, actually, you've got to go, the best idea on the day is what you should go with. And I think it's Orson Welles that said something about, I'm hugely paraphrasing here, towards the end of his career, Orson Welles said all the best things about his films are the mistakes, are the things he didn't plan. And he actually actively, in his last few films, was trying to make a film that was just all full of mistakes and thumbprints and things that were slightly off, because he said, actually, that was where all the magic was. Which is kind of...
The trick is just not admitting there were mistakes and there were happy accidents, and actually you planned them. And then people believe that you're really good at what you do.
Yeah, you should have just claimed ownership of that shot, Brett, really. You should have been like, that wasn't the first idea. That was...
I always give Jez credit for that shot. It's a cracking shot and it is in the film. And I feel no shame at all in saying he came up with that shot. And unless it gets real acclaim, and then I'll start claiming.
Yeah, it's the famous shot that's used in lots of film courses from here on out. I just want to go slightly off piece, which is obviously, let's bring up the big COVID in the room, and talk about that and how that's affected your work and all the work you've been doing recently. But also, is there stuff you've learned that's helped you adapt to this time, as opposed to falls?
Oh, guys, didn't like that.
Yeah. So what do you think? How has that affected you and your process and everything that's gone on since?
Well, we've got slightly different stories. So I'm not able to work on productions at the moment because I'm a an at-risk person. So weirdly, what's happened to me, I found, is I've gone back to what I used to do 20 years ago. So I'm making stuff on my own. So I'm just finishing off a short film I've been making on my own. So it's on the one hand, it's frustrating because I can't do productions as I would normally do them. But on the other hand, it's forcing me to be quite creative and think outside the box again and kind of make stuff on my own. So it's been incredibly exciting. And the one thing we do have during however many lockdowns we unfortunately will have to go through is time. So I've been refining been trying to upskill myself a little bit here and there. Sorry, John, I cut you off.
I did the same at the beginning, was to make stuff on my own, and it had a couple of sort of music video commissions and stuff where I couldn't have anyone there anyway. So it was, again, you embracing that restriction, going, I'm going to make this all by myself, but going, what do I want to get out of it as well? So it's sort of, I wasn't answering to anyone, so I was sort of building nice footage and built some stuff on that. Lots of the productions have gone to small. So this thing we're starting tomorrow, James, you know, if we weren't in a COVID world, we would probably have 25 people downstairs working, but we've got 4. So it's sort of, there's still very small crew for what we're trying to do. And yeah, it's sort of stripped back. There's a lot of doubling up. There's a lot of everyone doing everything and multitasking. But I guess similar for me, it has stripped back to what's important and what's the most I want to get out of this project. I've had a couple of bigger projects which were like the biggest things to go out since COVID let productions go out again, and they were tough things to make because we're all social distancing, and you know, a film set is a big busy place with lots of people climbing all over each other, you know, and this was trying to work out who could go where and stuff. Was making a film's hard enough, doing it in COVID was really tricky. But realizing that making something for people to watch who are in lockdown, who can sort of get that escapism and watch something, and you know, it's a really good thing. It is an essential thing to be making, I guess. So yeah, making sure we're making things that are important is probably one thing that it's done as well.
And also, restriction breeds creativity. Do you know what I mean? So the Why Would You projects that we're all about to start is a classic example of it. There's a budget there, but the budget isn't quite big enough for the script as it originally was. So it forces you to think outside the box and be more creative. And I sort of go, I feel like this is going to end up way more interesting than it would have done if we had twice the budget. And it's that having creative restrictions. So a colleague and a friend of ours, a guy called Mark Jenkin, has quite a lot of creative restrictions on the films he made. So he made the film Bait that was out last year, which was all shot on clockwork cameras and post-sync sound, and he self-develops the film. But that's his process, is to enforce those kinds of restrictions, and that's quite an interesting thing across cinema and cinema history. But I firmly believe restriction breeds creativity. I mean, the proof is in how many. This is being recorded, isn't it? So I'm not going to say anything specific, but how many large-scale Hollywood action films do you watch and completely forget every time you walk out of the cinema? And then how many low-budget, interesting films do you watch? Might not necessarily like, but you definitely don't forget them, and you think that's really memorable. That's a really interesting film.
And I was just thinking then about those, and it always goes back to the story. Again, I know it comes back full circle, but it is those things like lots of films that I've watched that are low budget, they're the ones that stick in my mind because the story was told very simply and beautifully. And I feel sometimes you can, I guess with money, as you said, if there's a cinematographer going, oh, there's a really beautiful shot over there, and you know that you've got that money to spend, or you've got to spend it somewhere, it could get lost because you're not keeping true to the story and how the story's being told to the audience. You kind of get swept up in the motion of making.
Yeah, and also if you listen to any, they don't really release them as much anymore now, but they used to on DVD, used to get director's commentaries on films, and it's really humbling because if you listen to any director commentary, almost all of them at some stage say, yeah, we didn't have enough time, we were always up against it. And these are like massive films, so you sort of think, it actually is probably very similar to making something low budget. You're always up against time, you're always up against lack of resources. It's just
in terms of maybe cinematography, but all that things in, because I've got a thing with students at the minute where they're sort of saying they can't get access to equipment, they can't go out and film the film they want to make. But the principles of, say, cinematography are the same, depending on whether you have a penny or £1,000,000. So the quality of light doesn't change, the amount of equipment you can get. So I'm sending students out to make a film on their phone lit by a torch and a candle, but still, and bed sheets and black towels or something, to think about how they're bouncing the light around. There's very DIY, there's lots of like websites and stuff you could check out to look at how to do DIY cheap filmmaking, getting a cheap camera, using your phone, torches, pieces of paper to bounce light around, you can still make some very, the first film camera, or the cameras me and Brett were using when we started out, it makes us sound old now.
I was literally about to say the same thing.
Yeah, this is a much better camera on here than any of the things we were using till, a long time ago.
Absolutely. And also, you just look at films like the Steven Soderbergh film High Flying Bird, High Flying Birds, which is all shot on iPhone, and Tangerine, that brilliant film, that's all shot on iPhones with little anamorphic lens adapters. Like, iPhones are great to shoot on. But
you can move them everywhere. You can get. I prefer to use a camera because that's just where I am. But having the way it moves is still going to have the same effect, whether it's a big camera on a dolly or whether it's your iPhone on a tea towel being pushed across the kitchen table. If it's a smooth move, it has the same effect. It doesn't matter about the equipment. It's fine.
And again, it's always going to come back to the story and the idea at the center. It doesn't really matter what you shoot on necessarily.
Yeah.
So communicating a story, an idea, an emotion, it's all back to that.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I'd like to just talk to the attendees and who are watching. It's great to have you here still, guys. If you want to send in questions, it'd be a really good opportunity to do that now. It's open to the floor. It was open before, but if you've got any questions, throw them in the Q&A function below and the chat function. It'd be great to talk that through with you all. If you've got any really specific ones. You talk about iPhones and stuff like that. Is there one bit of kit that you go to yourselves, I always need that, no matter what, no matter how much money, I always need that one thing? It could be a small thing, it could be a big thing. It depends. Do you have that one thing that you always bring on set with you?
I try, because I own quite a bit of equipment, so but I got to a stage where I built the kit, but I don't need to add to it now because I've got a camera, lenses, lights, and ways of moving the camera. But that's about, that's a bad answer. To me, it'd be, I'm biased towards light, but having some form of way of lighting stuff. So even if you're going out with your phone, to have a big white bed sheet that you could spread out outside to get a softer feeling of light, but being able to control the light, probably as a cinematographer would be the most important thing. But your eyes are probably the most important thing. I was
going to say your eyes.
Yeah.
Cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Cup of coffee and biscuits.
I think testing stuff on a phone and going out and test shooting an idea, just go and shoot it and just go. Lots of people, especially students I work with, they talk and develop their ideas and talk about it all the time and go, yeah, we'll do this. And when they go out to shoot, they just have so many problems and so many issues that they can't get anywhere close to that thing. That if they tested it 10 times before they got there, on a shoot, that's what we do. We always go out and test shoot things, or go to a recce, block it, and walk around with a camera or a viewfinder to try and make it happen. So,
yeah, I'm a big proponent of. Well, I always get asked, what happens if I can't draw? How do I do a storyboard? I'm like, well, your storyboard you don't have to be good at drawing to do a storyboard, but if you really don't want to draw it, just use your iPhone, take photos. That's what Tom did on the Neon Shadow. He did a brilliant photo storyboard for it. But yeah, I agree, like test shooting stuff is really, really key. And you've got an iPhone, you can download free editing software on your phone, so you can shoot and cut it together.
And going back to the sort of rough cut days where we were showing stuff in a bar, that was our testing ground of showing things and going, that works, that doesn't work. So if you do test something, cut it together, put it in front of someone and say, what do you think about this? Who's going to give you, someone, maybe a few people or someone who you trust their opinion. But I always say to students, you're not going to stand by the screen explaining what's going on to the film whilst it's happening. Your audience has to watch it. You can't be there and go, I know that lighting's quite scary, but it's not meant to be. It's just because we couldn't afford the light. But it still has that feeling. You can't explain it away. So, yeah. putting your stuff in front of people would be my advice.
With that in mind, because it sounds like those connections in that kind of rough cut constantly showing, is that something you'd encourage young film producers and stuff, just to grab a group of them and always just be making stuff for each other, or even wider, and starting to invite that?
Absolutely. I think obviously in COVID it's very difficult to do, but once we're out of COVID, if you're making stuff, watch it with people. Even if it means inviting a few people over to watch it on the TV in your house, obviously COVID safe.
Yeah.
You can't beat that in the room watching stuff. And then wider than that is entering into film festivals. But the important thing is to go to film festivals and go to screenings. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. You make a lot of short films, but actually we don't get a chance to watch a lot of short films with audiences. And I think there's a brilliant festival in Plymouth. Oh, yeah, there's a great short film festival in Plymouth. Like, go along to screenings of that when it's happening and see what works, what doesn't, other people's work. It's really, really important. Mm. Vital.
If you treat every film as you're going to become a better filmmaker for each film that you make, that you're not going to become the best filmmaker overnight. You might be amazing, but the more stuff you make, the more you learn, the more you develop. So having these sort of throwaway films that you can make just as an exercise, they'll teach you so much, but also they might be great. You might get an award at the festival or something like that. But really, just keep making stuff. And even if you are in lockdown and you can't get out to make stuff, grab your phone and shoot something in your room. Make a little film about your toothbrush or anything that's like very small, controlled. But think about the storytelling sort of craft, I think, and it's all about any craftsman. You need to develop it and learn how to do it. It's not something you're going to know instantly. It's about doing it.
It's about getting hands-on as well, isn't it? It's hands-on learning. Don't overthink it too much. Play around, play with stuff, and like Jon says, don't worry about sort of failing as well. Because if you make something and you don't think it's any good, you don't have to show it to anybody. But I still would encourage you to show that thing that you don't think is any good to somebody anyway. Mm. In the same way that if you write a song or write a script, or you're not necessarily the best judge of your own work, because we're all very self-conscious, I find. So
I wonder if there's a thing about putting stuff online, and when you put stuff on YouTube and you get weird comments from it, and you might go, but it's great to have stuff, and it's good to have an online presence. I say that I haven't even got my website library. That putting stuff out, and there's something really amazing about putting it in front of people or showing it to people or even if you do, put a link on YouTube or Vimeo or something, but organise a Zooms for people to watch it at the same time and then talk about it afterwards, so that you're connecting with them and seeing it happen, I guess, is important.
That's great. Cool. Have anyone got any questions out there? Please put them in the function if you have.
Is anyone there?
Is anyone there? Do we have people there?
We're just having a chat to each other.
Yes, this is really nice. Is with kind of Jon, this one's a bit more directed to you, because obviously Brett, you kind of work on projects that you've written as well as directed, as well as other projects. How do you discern sometimes what projects you want to work on, and what projects you potentially are not to, you might decide not to work on? How do you make that decision?
Well, I used to run a production company which had quite a lot of overheads and quite a lot of we had staff and the studio and space. So the nature of that business is it needed money coming in to feed it, so that I would find anything that had money attached to it, really, that needed to be a film. We were trying to do high production stuff, but I'd be making commercials for a teddy bear, and I'm just going, whoa, do I want to be making this? Is this what I want to do? I'm letting the money sort of choose what kind of work I work on, and that was out of necessity because we had to make that happen. But it still built skills and built relationships and did things like that. But now I don't have that, so I'm very much, the overheads are not as big, so I can kind of pick and choose a little bit. But I guess the jobs I go for are the things where people are wanting me for my skills, rather than just, we just need you in to do that thing. And the worst place for me is to go on a film set in a sort of junior role where I've got no say on something now. So if I go on as maybe a spark on a TV drama where I actually it's, you know, I'm not allowed to stand up and go, hey guys, have you thought about maybe shooting it from here, or do you want to try it from there? Because you know, it's above my pay grade to sort of to say that, and I'm not, you're not really allowed to do that. And actually, on a film set, if there's loads of suggestions come from everywhere, it can become quite confusing. So sort of bite your tongue and do that sort of thing. But being at the sort of creative front of a film is where I really want to be. So in that sort of sharp end of like making decisions, going, can we do this, or can we try that, or that's where I want to be now. And if I get a project come in and I go, do you know what, I'm not going to be involved with that, then I probably, if it's not a very creative input, I'd probably go, how much do they pay me? Do I need to do it? Do I need to do it to survive? But it took a very long time to learn how to say no to work. Like it took a good 10 years to learn how to say, I don't want to do this job, sorry. Even if someone's saying, you know, there's lots of money involved in it, I go, actually, it doesn't work for me. You know, it's time away from wherever you're doing, and the more time I'm spending doing something I don't want to do, I'm not focusing on the things I want to do. So I guess learning to say no, but if you're starting out, you really need to experience a lot of stuff and grab a load of stuff, and that time will come. I very much, my advice if you're starting out is just say yes to everything. You know, go on it. If you don't enjoy it when you're there, you've learned that you don't enjoy it, which is a good thing, which is a positive thing. So yeah, that was, I guess, did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does answer the question. I was just thinking that sometimes you know, I don't always get to direct sort of creative projects. I sometimes have to do kind of what you would consider corporate films and stuff like that. But I've sort of learned over the years to not make something that's kind of flat and lifeless, like a kind of lifeless sort of corporate film. I kind of always try and pitch it to the client of going, let's just make a film, and how do we make this something more beautiful or interesting? How do we hook it in? So I've ended up making couple of films for Cornwall Council, which started out, the original intention for the films was quite sort of straightforward and could have been quite boring, but actually they were really open to me going, actually I'd like to do something creative like this, and it was sort of a way of turning them into more interesting creative projects. And then by being invested and interested in them, I kind of felt like I brought a bit more of my character to them. So that's kind of linked to what you guys were talking about as well. And also, John, you're absolutely right. Learning to say no is really important.
So someone said to me once that, especially if you're working for a client, so more in the sort of corporate world or commercial or something like that, if someone's approached you to work on their film or make them a film, you're the film expert. They're the expert of whatever that product is or whatever that their company is. So a friend of mine always said, if I like someone, I'll give them, sorry, if I don't like someone or don't like the client, I'll give them what they want because they're coming with it. If I like them, I'll give them what they need, because it's actually you're putting in that, you're the expert in what's the creative thing going to put behind that. Yeah, but lots of smaller businesses or corporates or things like that, they sort of go, oh, this is my opportunity to be the filmmaker, and they'll come in and go, we're going to do this shot, and you go, oh, actually that's going to be terrible, but if you're paying for it and that's what you want, and I don't really agree with you, then I'll just make it. But if you want to you can give them what they need. It's more important.
That's
it's
great.
Quite hard to sometimes tell people.
Cool. We've got couple of questions in. We'll go for the first one, which is how do you find your actors? Big question, really. But how do you do that?
So normally through the sort of traditional route. So I know quite a lot of actors, having worked on stuff for a number of years, but also put casting calls out. Spotlight is always good. Look on Spotlight. So if this person that's asked us is an actor asking this question, and sometimes it's just timing as well. So a lot of actors might get in contact with me via my website. And it's happened a couple of times where somebody's got in contact and sent a CV and just gone, hey, it's a bit cheeky, but you know, if you ever need anybody, and it's that thing where you go, actually randomly, your timing has been quite good. So I think it's always good to kind of reach out to people if you want to work with people. But casting calls are the sort of main thing. Keep an eye on sort of casting calls going out.
I think if you're an actor or any role in the thing, having show reels or having stuff where you can show people is key. Maybe knowing where you sit in the market a little bit, or what level of stuff you're going to get if you put a terrible showreel up, people watch it and go, oh, actually, no, that could be worse than actually not having a showreel. So yeah, it's sort of thinking about the quality of the stuff that you're putting out there.
Yeah.
But,
and it's, but I guess especially at the moment as well, it's like really good self-tape where there's like clear introduction, knowing that that can be the difference, especially when you're doing big casting calls. For example, when we had Why Would You, we had like over 200 applications for 3 parts that me and John and John as well will sift through. So sometimes those little things can just make you switch on a little bit more, and like show reels where you can go, oh, that self-tape was interesting, and go see the other work, and that can also really help you cut through.
I think start strong on those self-tapes, especially if someone's sifting through hundreds of them. They might only watch the first 15 seconds, so really start strong and get their attention, and then we could move on.
I always think it's good as well to invite people to, if you're in a play or something like that, invite people to see it. Like, it's always good as well to see people. That's how we cast. We had a very, very specific role in the first feature I made. And we didn't know because we were casting people that we knew, and we were just like, we just don't know anybody who's right for this part. And then literally that day we were working on it, and we had a big discussion about the actor and go, well, we'll put a casting call out. And then we went to a rehearsed reading that evening in the theatre, and this actor just walked out on stage. I'd never seen him before or anything, and I just immediately went, no way, that guy, he's exactly right. And that turned out to be an actor called Dean Noland, and we've been friends for a decade now. But it just was a lightning bolt moment of just seeing this person in a play and going, he's brilliant, he's exactly what we're looking for.
Great. We'll probably make this we've got time for a couple more questions if anyone's sending through. But Hugh James has sent through. So hi Hugh, how you doing?
Hi Hugh.
We all know Hugh, just for other people who's attending. He sent through asking about investment, because he sort of said BFI and lottery money sometimes doesn't look for quality, but they're also making local content. So how can investment be brought to Devon and Cornwall if you're making this local area, or how do you access those kind of big pots of money or first stuff that's very made in Devon, Cornwall, or even wider in the southwest?
Yeah, that's
a tricky one.
That's a tricky one. Yeah, that's a long conversation, I would say, because some of that lottery money and BFI money has come to Cornwall, certainly at different points, but it's yes, that's a I need to have a real think about that, Hugh, before I answered that. That's a difficult question.
There's a weird world that in the sort of funding thing, that people won't fund a film unless you've had a funded film. So if you're starting out, you've got to it's really hard to get into that sort of thing. And so I don't know how we pull money down. That's really someone else's job.
Yeah. I think that thing though sometimes is about doing the work, doing the content, doing the kind of, like you said on your film, Brett, about how you kind of just did it very low budget, did enough, and kind of did a bit of self-funding. Is sometimes taking that risk on yourself, isn't it? Sometimes when you're starting out, is going, I'm going to risk a little bit, not too much. I'm not encouraging anyone to get into massive loads of debt for film.
Quite a few successful crowdfunders and things like that can go together to get. If your project's really important and really needs to be made, and you make one of the crowdfunder films or one of the other sort of things like that, then they can be quite successful. But it needs to be. No one's going to just fund another zombie film.
I would build up to a crowdfunder as well. Right. Starting out, I would make some stuff first so that you can kind of build up a bit of faith in people when you're still crowdfunding. Because the other thing, to be brutally honest about crowdfunder, is you kind of get to do one, and then you can't really crowdfund a film for a good few years after that, because you don't really want to tap that again. So you want to make sure when you're crowdfunding something, it's at the right time for the right project. Yeah, I'm thinking about Hugh's question. It's really interesting. There was a period of time where where productions were coming to Cornwall, but it wasn't going to filmmakers in Cornwall. It was kind of, I think the idea behind the money was to go towards upskilling crew in Cornwall. But then what happened was it felt like a lot of productions came down and brought crew with them. Do you remember that, John? There was a period of time where
there was a period, but I think that was a long time ago. But the sort of reasoning behind that was the more films that are shot in Cornwall, the more it will build tourism, and the sort of Lord of the Rings effect on New Zealand. That's sort of, that's what they're trying to create. Whereas actually, as filmmakers, we're going, we want to create filmmaking jobs. We want to get our sort of, not worry about tourism. So some of the biggest stuff that came down, that was when we were starting out.
Yeah, I guess that's actually way back when now. The annals of history. Hugh says, I've brought the chat up. Hugh says there's no point in asking the easy ones, which I love.
that is very true. Hugh, thank you for that.
When you find the money, do you want to just come and give us a job?
yeah. Hugh, if you got it, give us a call. That would be fabulous. I think we'll leave it there, guys. I think that's really, really great.
John saying, give me a job.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm going to leave.
John, I've given you both a job, haven't we? We're starting it tomorrow. So thank you both for your time. Oh, no, we've got another Q&A. Is that you? Always hoping. Bro.
Well, thank you to the attendees in there. And hello, Connie. I know Connie. She's one of the attendees. And hello, Hugh. I don't think I know any of the others. There's a Laura. I know many Lauras, but she hasn't put her surname on there. But thank you very much for listening.
How can you see them?
You go down the bottom, it says participants there. So you can look at a participant list at the bottom. But yeah, thank you all for coming so much. It's been really great having you involved, and it's been really great having these guys here. Thank you to Laura for saying that. And thank you for Jon and Brett for giving up their time to discuss this evening. It's been really enlightening, these discussions, and hopefully the young makers are going to go out and start making films in such difficult times at the moment, but then start building their communities that they can be doing something similar in the next 20 years that you guys have. So
just get out there and make stuff. And thank you for the kind wishes for the project, Hugh. And thank you very much for all your work on the script. Fantastic.
And if you need to contact us, just go through James. If you want to send us anything, click free. We'd always love to see what stuff that's been made.
Yeah, so if you want to reach out, you can reach us on rebels@barbicantheatre.co.uk or go to our website. Brett mentioned his website. Look him up, Brett Harvey. What is your website, Brett?
BrettHarvey.co. I better find out. I can't remember if it's a .co or .co.uk or a .com. It's a .co.uk, BrettHarvey.co.uk. It's nearly up to date.
Yeah, that's great. And then Jon, I'm sure yours will be up very shortly as well.
Yeah, it's only been about 14 years. It's coming soon, I'm sure.
Definitely. It's been really great having you all involved. If you feel able to give a donation towards the Barbican to continue these free webinars and all the other young people's training work that we do here, it'll be great. So you can do that through a QR code that will come up in a minute. You can go onto our website. We would be really grateful for that, because we're doing this for free and we want to keep it that way and keep reaching out to everyone in Plymouth, the Southwest, beyond. So really great to have you all involved. If you need again, please get in contact if you want to, and we hope you have a great evening and hope to see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Jon. Thank you, James.